Hello class and welcome to MSE 402 Engineering Project Management. What I'd like to do is I'd like to go ahead and walk through the week 1 or module 1 course lecture for you, and it is on the project introduction phase. Let's go ahead and jump into that project introduction model and some of the components, and then we'll start to walk through all of the areas that you'll be able to see. Now, within the PMI or PMBOK book or body of knowledge, you're going to see that they describe projects broken down into a series of phases, and those phases, as you can see here, overlap each other. In the image that's off to the side of me, you can see that you've got the initiating phase, the planning phase, the executing phase, the monitoring and process and control phase, and then the closing process group phase. Now that is the PMI or PMBOK module. Now what we've done is we've added some additional components to this model, and that's the model that I'll be displaying for you, and that's the model that we're working to this course with, and that has an introduction phase, because one of the things that the PMBOK or PMI body of knowledge or book of knowledge does not cover is some of the I'll call it, components that are necessary on a project before you can get going. Now you'll see that the project life cycle in the image right below me, which is broken out of the PMI book of knowledge, talks about not only the process groups but knowledge areas. So there's a variety of knowledge areas we'll be covering also, 10 knowledge areas. So let's go ahead and jump into the model that we've created for you, and you can see that in this model we have 6 phases, and we show how these phases overlap. This is a more accurate demonstration of what actually happens on a project. You can see that there are certain things that are covered in the introduction of a project prior to its official initiating that need to be done. Part of that has to do with the project proposals, putting together skill set resumes of the people that are available, reviewing best practices, trying to formalize that team contract. All of those components are covered in what we refer to as the introduction phase. And you're going to see that as we walk through module by module, week by week, your project, I'll call it evolution, we're going to be covering each of these areas. Now, one of the other things that I think is very unique about this model that's very impactful is that you'll see that on the side, changes are constantly happening as you're moving through any one of these phases. Each phase has got changes that happen that cause you to have to be reactive and adapt. Sometimes you can be proactive and anticipate, trying to set yourself up for the best possible use of the right people at the right place at the right time, making you effective and efficient. And ultimately, that's what a project manager or program manager is striving for. Project management is really focused on that. How do we get the right people at the right time in the right place? That's how we can become successful. So let's go ahead and jump into this. You'll see, as I said, that introduction phase consists of the process groups needed to bring internal and external stakeholders together to formulate what we refer to as the preliminary information required to establish a project. It's not official until you get into another area, but at this point, many companies find that all of this is required up front. The review of best practices. So we take a look at what other projects have done that could coordinate and kind of drive us in a specific direction. We've got a project resume that is put together. These are the skill sets of the people that are available. Which people do we want? You've got a team contract, even at a temporary level, that's floated to you so you understand what the team contract looks like. For us, that team contract is going to be an internal document, and that's one where we, within the team itself, make, I'll call it a good stab, a good clear understanding of what we think our norms and our operating policies, procedures, actions, and behaviors are going to be while we're working within this project. You've got the real project proposal that you review and a selection of a project. So you'll see within this environment that we've established for you, we've got a company that we've created, an artificial company that is running a simulation. So you've got a 6-week simulation or 6-module simulation that you're walking through. You're going to be doing a project selection, and you're going to be reviewing a project proposal that's been put in front of your team. So let's just talk about the characteristics of a project when we start looking at this first stage. Project management is about a temporary undertaking. Remember that. Projects are things that haven't been repeated over and over again. There's a uniqueness to them. They're all supposed to have a different or unique characteristic to them. And project examples like that could be from the finance group, construction, building a new facility, government, formulating a new agency, technologies, merging two products into a single one. So you'll see that in those project characteristics, you have a definite start and end point. And that's one of the things that we really require from you. You must tell us what date you think this project is going to start on, what date you think this project is going to end on. That gives us the project duration. Once the end point is reached and the project is over, that's when we close the project down. So you need to remember that the start would be when you officially start a project, the end would be when you anticipate that you would close that project down. Now, almost all projects in most major companies are run in a matrix environment. And there are multiple different types of matrix. So one of the things we need to explore and you need to understand is that there are different types of matrix functional organizations. So there's a weak matrix and a strong matrix, a balanced matrix, a functional matrix, and then for many companies, what we refer to as a projectized or pure project matrix environment. So as a project manager, you're going to be required to be able to work within any one of these. A strong matrix organization, you may be, as a project manager, in charge of everything that you actually work with. You may have resources that are given to you on your team. A weak matrix, these people could be streamlined to you only for short periods of time, and then they would be pulled back automatically to another area. A balanced matrix would be where we actually kind of balance between the two. It's a blend of that weak and that strong. And then the functional matrix is where we start looking at things from a functional perspective. All of your analysts may be in a specific area. All the engineers may be in a specific area. And you may get your work assigned to you that way. Manufacturing the same way, etc. And then the projectized pure project environment is where you, as I said, as the project manager, may have complete control of all the characteristics. So you can see a matrix organization structural map on the image below us. This is very similar to the type of environment that you're going to be working in. That weak matrix, as we talked about, is more where a cross-functional team is composed of individuals from many different functional backgrounds, such as could be sales, human resources, information technology. In a high-tech environment, it could be engineers, it could be manufacturing, and some of these may be referred to as co-located teams. In the common terminology today, many team environments that have a strong matrix or a projectized matrix could be referred to as integrated product teams, IPTs. Okay, let's go ahead and take a peek at what a strong matrix is. The PM is provided with a cross-functional team that is dedicated to that project. You would have all of the resources that you need assigned to you. You could even be responsible for putting their performance reviews together. So this is the easiest type of environment for a project manager to utilize. In that weak matrix, you may have to argue or negotiate with other project managers to get resources at the right time. Within the strong matrix, typically you would have those assigned to you and they would be available for you when you needed them. Let's go ahead and take a peek at that balanced matrix, and you can see that the balanced matrix type of environment functions very similar to the weak matrix. Within this matrix, the project manager is going to share power with the functional manager. So there's a functional manager and there's the project manager, and you're going to be sharing that power. You don't have total autonomy over what happens. Balanced matrices therefore work best when the project is equally important as the day-to-day work within the enterprise, and that the project requires cross-functional expertise. That means you have to have people with different disciplines that are assigned to you or blended into you to report to you so that you can accomplish or complete the activities that you've got required on a day-to-day or within a module type of environment. Let's talk about that functional matrix project now. Within a functional organization, workers report to a single supervisor. That supervisor could be a project manager, it could be it could be a functional manager. The supervisor reports to the single manager and to the single person in senior management. So there's a clear line of authority. You can see how that authority isn't blended off into multiple people. He being or she, the person working in this environment, should have a clear understanding of who is delegating the type of tasks they need to do to them. This organization is specifically designed to run the day-to-day affairs, but lacks the infrastructure to accomplish a project. Okay? This organization usually does not have a true PM, so there's no true PM assigned to it, but some of the people working in this type of environment may be called that. They may have that title and be called a project manager. The organization will usually employ what we refer to as project coordinators or expediters in order to accomplish these type of projects. These individuals will report up to what we refer to as the functional managers and usually lack the latitude that would be given to a true project manager. So you could have a functional manager who's in charge of all of the engineers, another one that's in charge of all the analysts, another one that's in charge of your manufacturing representatives, and another one in charge of your quality representatives. And what they would do is they would go ahead and basically allocate to you a specific person. That person would not be assigned formally to the team. They would be streamlined to you when you need them. Now, that projectized and pure matrix project is an entirely different organizational form. In this type of organization, the project team is completely separated from the functional organization. That means I have an autonomous team functioning, and that autonomous team is independent of those other areas that would provide resources towards them. I have a dedicated team that is basically assigned from the parent company. I will not release any of these people until my jobs are completed. So therefore, I don't have to worry about constraints as far as other teams needing my people and pulling them away. There's a completely clear line of autonomy, as you can see within the diagram that we've provided for you over here. This type of organization is used primarily in research and development projects. So if you're working on a R&D project, you are most commonly going to be working in a projectized pure matrix environment. And the other piece to that is that you may have to wear multiple hats, which means that you may have to, from a design standpoint and an engineering standpoint, be able to do multiple tasks. Rather than having one person come in to do exactly one specific task, you may be required to be able to do multiple ones in that type of environment. And this type of environment is commonly used in the automotive industry, pharmaceuticals, and aerospace. You're going to find that they function best in that projectized pure matrix type of environment. As you can see, the bottom line or the bullet here is the choice in which organizational structure you use for any given project is important. It can easily influence the chances of success. So depending on your organization, it may have already determined as a project manager what type of environment you're going to be functioning in. And you may have to move from company to company and being able to adapt. So as a project manager, you may be required to wear different hats, be able to function in different types of, I'll call it project environments, whether it's matrix from a strong, weak to a balanced to a pure projectized one. So those are the challenges that project managers have in front of them on a daily basis. Now, let's talk about the difference between leading versus managing. And what I want to do is I want to give you just kind of a background setting. So almost all project managers are going to be responsible for doing both. I know that we have project leaders and I know that we have project managers, but you're going to find as a project manager, that title, that type of environment that you're in is constantly changing. And you're going to find that, as we talk about here, leadership is about preparing an organization for change. You're going to have to do that as a project manager. You're still going to be talking about the long-term vision. As a manager, you're going to be repeating that over and over to the organization. And as a project manager, if you're a true project manager, and by true I mean that if you're a pure project manager and you are not responsible for doing any leadership, then I would say if you're only doing that management perspective of it, then you're looking at schedules. You're looking at how do you develop the project scope? How do you get the resources available? How do you start working on the day-to-day activities of making your team effective and efficient? Okay? And good management is about bringing stability and order by smart planning, establishing procedures, monitoring and controlling the execution of a project. And as you remember from that model we talked about in one of the first slides, those are broken down into different phases. So there's different phases that as a project manager you will be required to bring your skill sets into and be able to look at how do I best lead and manage the team and the project as we continue to move forward from the first phase all the way to the last one. So let's just take a peek and pull at what we call project leadership. Project leadership is about recognizing and communicating, significantly things to improve the direction and operation of the project. You as a project manager are still responsible for conducting this. You will be responsible for motivating stakeholders, team members, in order to work together and overcoming the challenges that are created by change and realizing previously unknown objectives. Now, in this environment when we talk about project leadership and we talk about project management, there's almost a blend of the two, as I have talked about, where you are responsible for wearing both those hats at different times. You need to be flexible, you need to be dynamic enough to where you can move and shift, almost like a shapeshifter, and model yourself either as a project leader if necessary, understanding the skills that are required, and then at another time you may need to back down from that project leadership role into a project management role where you're leading the day-to-day activities. How do we get things done? Both of those are going to be required. Now, let's talk about some of the ways that we put projects together. There's something called a project OBS. It's an organizational breakdown structure. And what it is it's a functional chart that shows all of the people broken down by organizations. The OBS shows you from I'll call it a 10,000 foot view, what resources you have available for you in an organizational breakdown. It's similar to a top-down blowout or kind of structure to illustrate reporting relationships on a project, and it's similar to an org chart. It's going to have that top down where you've got one person at the top or one organization at the top that is in controlling these, which controls these, which controls these, and those flow down. And this is very, very common in what we refer to as a functional organization. So that's referred to as the project OBS, organizational breakdown structure. In addition to that, you've got something else that's referred to as the RAM, the project RAM, which is the responsibility assignment matrix. Now, the responsibility assignment matrix can be broken down in two different ways. It can be broken down by individual, or it can be broken down by the functional group that's responsible for a particular area. So if you take the work breakdown structure, which is the work that's required for the project, and you'll see this matrix that we've got under the image that I'm showing you. That is a typical RAM, and what it does, it shows the work breakdown structure, what work must be done in each of the WBS areas, okay, and then who or what organization is responsible for that. So if it's in the beginning 1.1.1.1 area of the WBS, it may be engineers that are responsible for putting preliminary design together, preliminary analysis. So those groups would be responsible and would be identified there. Manufacturing may not come until maybe WBS 1.1.1.6 when we actually start to do some manufacturing. That would mean that the design has been completed, quality has bought it off, it's gone out to an outside vendor, and the manufacturing area might be responsible for it at that point. Logistics would get it after it's been delivered to us, and maybe it has to go to test after that. So you can see that this is a way to understand which organization is responsible for what area of the project. Okay, and remember that the RAM typically does not have individual names in it. And the reason for that is because you have another form called a RACI, R-A-C-I, which is the Responsible, Accountable Consultant and Informed chart. And this is where we actually take that same type of philosophy. What are the components that are responsible for being completed on a project? So if you take a look at the RACI chart that we've got here, you've kind of taken that WBS, that work breakdown structure, and you've taken all of the elements of it. The tasks and subtasks are components that are listed in the one matrix coming right below my image. And then you can see that what we've done is we've assigned different people on the team to that. The RACI gives me an ability to understand two different things. One, have I over allocated someone? If I've got someone doing multiple jobs at the same time, this type of I'll call it illustration, would give me the ability to understand that. The other is, it gives me the understanding of, from a responsibility standpoint, who's responsible for what? Who's accountable for what? Who needs to be informed when a certain area is happening, and who needs to be consulted for potentially approval, or, you know, if you've got areas or interfaces that interchange with each other, maybe that's an area where you need to be consulted so that you understand exactly what your group's responsibility is in association with another one. You're going to find that systems engineering organizations love a RACI form because it gives you the project on a snapshot to kind of give yourself a heads up as to what's going on. I have seen RACI charts also where not only does it have the name, but it has a I'll call it an approximation of the hours associated with that particular job. And that way we can find out if we are over allocating someone in their ability to do a 40-hour job. You know, maybe we've got 80 or 120 hours worth of effort that we're showing in a small window of time. It may lead us to understand if we need more people. Now, effective project managers have got an ability to deal with what we call the deeply contradictory nature of their position. There's a lot of things happening. People that are project managers either love the job or they hate the job. And one of the reasons that they may love the job is that every day is different. There's something happening every day that's different, and it's a constant challenge to try to pull in different things. So there's a series of skills and traits that a project manager must have. A systems thinking perspective is probably one of the most important. And then the other one I would tell you is at the bottom, the optimistic side. You must be optimistic. You cannot be a naysayer. You cannot be telling people, well, we just can't get this done. You've got to be the cheerleader for the team. Communication is essential for a project manager. You really have to have good communication skills. Not only verbal, but written. You've got to be able to stand up and do presentations. You've got to be able to pitch to customers, stakeholders. You need to be able to talk to your team. And then the other piece of it is that time management. You have to understand from a time management what needs to happen where. These are skills that you must have, and these are skills that every project manager continues to refine. The soft skills are essential for us to be able to move forward. Okay? As you pull a team together, every project, from the beginning of it to the end of it, is going to go through 5 phases, which I refer to as the Tuckman's 5-stage model. There are a couple other names for it, but this is the Tuckman model. You form the group. You put the team together. The groups get acquainted. They start to understand who they are. They set new rules. And then there's a storming section. This is what happens when people start to try to understand what's required of them. Storming is typically chaotic. It may have some, I'll call it some type of environments where it's not productive. It seems like things aren't getting done. They're starting to try to understand what's going on. You know, who's responsible for what? Why are we not getting this done? I needed this on Tuesday. You gave it to me Wednesday. All of those things happen in that storming section of a team. People are starting to get to know each other. The norming section, or the norming phase, you know, this stage is where people start to develop relationships with each other. You start to understand how things work. You can actually start to feel the team cohesively become one. People start to come together. It's a very fun thing to see happen. And then the only thing better than that is step 4 for me, which is when you're performing. This is when all the cylinders on a project are banging away, and what you can see is that everybody is getting everything done at the right time. People are working together. That is an incredible, I'll call it, feeling. And for a project manager, number 4 is where you want to keep your team. If you can get them to performing as fast as possible, that's the goal, because this is where you're most effective and the most efficient. This is where you've got the right people at the right time doing the right thing. This is where you really, really start functioning as a high-performing team. And then once everything is done, the next phase is adjourning, and that would be where you actually release people back to other teams or other organizations. And then in addition to that, so you've got that model, there's another model called the 5-stage team development, and you're going to see this is almost identical in its structure. Okay? So this 5-stage is where we try to tell you, as a project manager, you want to try to get people to that performing capability as quickly as possible. And there's a little bit of information for you here, but the studies have shown that this model only applies to individuals and teams who have not previously worked together. And the reason for that is, if a team has worked together, you've already developed some of those relationships. You may start to run into other issues where you may have mini groups within a larger group, and they may have their own structures. So there's other disciplines, other things that are going to happen that could be a little bit different. The next model we want to show you is called the punctuated equilibrium model, and it shows the formation of a team at the beginning of a project. And it walks through what happens in phases. So you can see that phase 1 is that first meeting, and then you come over, and before you can go into phase 2, there's a transition. That means that something needs to actually happen on, I'll call it the project or the team. It's almost like if you were to break a project up like a football game into different quarters. From a lean perspective, you might say that these would be mini sprints, or the agile environment might refer to them as that. But the punctuated equilibrium model is another one that kind of illustrates for you exactly what is happening in a team as you're moving from one phase to the next, to the next, to the next. Okay? And what you want to do is you want to try to get people working together. That's the most important thing, is how do I get my people working together? Now what we've got for you here is a diagram and an illustration of what we refer to as a high-performing work team. And what are the 4 quadrants or 4 components to it? And you're going to see that communication, right below my image, is one of the most important. And you're going to find that communication weaves itself into all of the others. Interaction, contribution, the group process. How do we get all of these characteristics working together for us? Well, the easiest thing to do is to create a shared vision for the group. That means that everybody understands where we're going, what we're trying to do. And you start to set up some norms. So the project manager, if you show up late to every meeting, what you're doing is you're modeling the behavior for the organization that everyone can come in late. So you demonstrate not only the skills, but you demonstrate the behaviors that are acceptable within your teams. And the only way to have a high-performing work team is where everybody is accountable for what their actions are. And they are acting in a way that the group would want to be seen as. They've established a team identity, and what we want to do at this point is get everybody on that team knowing that I am working on this team, and where is this team headed? What is the goal? What is the end point? Where are we headed? That's what you're trying to strive for. High-performing work teams also have got a couple other characteristics. So the reward system and structure is set up to basically reward the team. It doesn't pull one specific person out. Okay? They orchestrate the decision-making progress, and by that means that you can make decisions using consensus. People will actually come forward and say, I may not agree with you, but I can agree to disagree, and I am willing to do this. I will go down this path because I've built up trust, and I understand that the decisions that are being made are the best for the team, not necessarily the best for just me. Okay? These type of teams, high-performing teams, find a way to manage natural conflicts within the project team. It'll seem at times like there is very, very little conflict, and that's because they've established clear roles and responsibilities. They understand who's responsible for doing what. And then the other thing is they are open to and involved in team building, I'll call it exercises. And it's almost like that day-to-day activity that they're working on continues to reinforce that team building. The team's effectiveness happens, and you start to create a culture and behavior of performance. That's what you're looking for as you're trying to create what we refer to as high-performing work teams. Now, that sounds like a lot to have to do. One of the other things I'm going to tell you is that there's a couple areas of a project that are fun, and there's a couple areas that are not fun. And one of them is going to be managing conflicts. As a project manager or working within a project, you are going to be responsible for trying to manage conflicts. And conflicts are going to come up. And typically, there are certain things that drive conflict. One is priorities, where you need to be in two places at the same time. Where your priorities are split, you may have another project or another program that's pulling at someone, and they are trying to do something else associated with where they're at. So you may have limited resources. Schedules may be too, I'll call it aggressive, and that people can't get things done. This can cause it. You can have policies and procedures that have gone out of date or are unclear. That can cause conflict. You have technical opinions where you could have different SMEs, subject matter experts, or different people on the project who think that things from a technical perspective should be different, and there is no way for them to express their opinion. That will cause conflict. Lack of funding from a cost standpoint, where we can't fund certain activities until a different area of a project, causes it. And then, of course, you have certain people that just don't play well with each other. They are not the kind of people that are user-friendly towards being around other people. So there are personality issues that come up, and all of these can cause conflict. As a project manager, you're going to be responsible for coming in either an active or a passive way and finding a way to solve this conflict. The longer you wait to interact, the worse it becomes. The sooner you come in and start to work towards resolving the conflict, the better off you're going to be. There's a couple different techniques that we're going to talk about. So when trying to get rid of conflict, confrontation and problem solving is one. It is a natural way for trying to handle this kind of, I'll call it, style of looking at how can we get through a conflict. So confrontation and problem solving. You've got to confront the problem. What is it? How do we solve the problem? And then there's got to be collaboration. Will the team, be able to reach consensus on how to solve this issue together? And this may require step 3, which is compromise, where somebody's going to have to say, okay, you're right. Let's go down that path. Compromise involves 2 or more parties in a conflict to give up something in the negotiation in an attempt to resolve the conflict. Now, number 4, smoothing. Smoothing is a technique that allows focus on the positives between the parties that are conflicting in an attempt to de-emphasize the sources of the conflict. Smoothing is something that can be done, but if you smooth out a conflict, you may find out that it continues to resurface over and over and over again. Okay, step 5, sometimes a conflict can be resolved with nothing more than a little time. This doesn't mean you sit back and wait for things to work themselves out. It means that you sit back and reserve the right to let the parties talk to each other. Allow them to try to work it out within themselves if possible, but you are still involved. You are still there to kind of help facilitate that process. And then the final one, number 6, it's the opposite of smoothing. It's forcing it together. This is where you pull the people together that have got different opinions. We go into the same room, and we are not leaving here until we have a resolution to this. I will sit in here and work with you. Everybody can own their own opinion, but once we leave this room, this problem is going to be solved. Now, those are 6 techniques for solving conflict on your projects. Project managers are going to be required to do that because at any point, from phase 1 all the way through phase 5 on a project, you can have conflict that becomes apparent. And sometimes it's little things that cause it. Sometimes it's internal things, external things. Sometimes it could be just bringing a new person onto the program or the project, which can cause it. So in closing, okay, project manager clarification questions. Why should the project even be launched? This is a question you should ask yourself as a project manager. You should be able to understand that and be able to repeat that to anyone. Anybody that comes and asks you the project in the phase we're in and the project that we're working, why should the project even be launched? 2, what are the risks and potential obstacles? You should know that. 3, who will be responsible for what? Everybody in that RACI form kind of identifies who the people are that are going to be accountable, but you may have matrix people that you have to bring in that have got specialty talents. You need to know exactly who's going to be responsible for what. The next one, where are the funds coming from? Where is your funding coming from? You need to understand that. And then the next one is going to be, when should each milestone be reached? You should have an integrated plan that shows exactly where all the milestones are on your project and when they are due. And if there's a little bit of what we refer to as slack, to where you can accomplish them within a window, you should understand what that window is and the critical path. What is the critical path, which is the longest path through the project, and am I impacting it if I do make this decision one way or the other decision another way? So make sure you follow these 5 steps, and we refer to these as the WH questions. You need to make sure that all projects that you're working on as a program manager or a project manager, you have the ability to answer all of these. Okay? Now, once we finish that, that is our Module 1, Week 1 lecture. I want to know if you've got any additional questions associated with this. So feel free to contact me, either email me or in the modules. Let me know if there's additional questions associated with this. I want you to have a great week, and congratulations on getting into Module 1, Week 1, that first phase, the introduction phase of a project. Have a great week. Goodbye.